I never thought I'd be dealing with the most entitled homeowners association Karen in history, but life has a funny way of surprising you. My grandfather, who I'll call Pops, is honestly the sweetest man alive. At 78, he still insists on driving himself to his doctor's appointments, grocery shopping, and our weekly lunch dates. Independence means everything to him, especially since Grandma passed. Last month, I decided to meet Pops at Oak Ridge Elementary, where my son goes to school. I'm on the PTA, and we were having our spring fundraiser that afternoon. Pops wanted to come support, and then we'd all grab dinner after. The school parking lot is always a nightmare during events, so I told him to come early and I'd save him a spot near the entrance since he has a legitimate handicap placard. When I arrived, I noticed several spots near the front were empty, despite the reserved for event staff signs that our HOA president Deborah Wilson had put up that morning. Deborah ran both the HOA for our neighborhood and somehow managed to get herself elected as head of the school's parent committee last year. The woman collected positions of petty authority like some people collect stamps. These spots aren't being used and my grandfather needs close access, I explained to the young volunteer managing the parking area. He's a retired police officer with a valid handicap placard. The volunteer nodded and moved the cone for me. I texted Pops that his spot was secured. 20 minutes later, as I was setting up the balloon arch for the fundraiser entrance, I heard a commotion outside. The sound of an angry voice carried through the open doors. I immediately recognized it as Deborah's. You could pick out her particular blend of entitlement and condescension from a mile away. I rushed outside to see Deborah standing beside my grandfather's car, her face flushed with anger, pointing repeatedly at the reserved sign, while my grandfather stood calmly beside his vehicle. Pops was holding his handicap placard in one hand and leaning slightly on his cane with the other. I don't care who told you it was okay, these spots are for event organizers only. I made that very clear in the newsletter, and the signs are right here. She was practically shouting at my grandfather. Her perfectly highlighted blonde bob remained unnaturally still, despite her animated gesturing. Mom, I understand, but my granddaughter arranged this spot for me. I have mobility issues, my grandfather explained in his patient, gravelly voice. His years on the police force had taught him how to stay calm in the face of irrationality. I quickly approached them. Deborah, I cleared this with the parking attendant. Those signs weren't approved by the school board, and there are plenty of spots available for staff further down. I tried to keep my voice even, professional. Deborah turned to me, her eyes narrowing. Oh, of course it's you, Melissa. Always thinking the rules don't apply to your family. This is exactly the kind of entitlement I'm trying to eliminate from this school community. The irony of Deborah accusing anyone else of entitlement was almost laughable. This was the same woman who had once demanded that a neighbor remove their basketball hoop because it disrupted the aesthetic harmony of the cul-de-sac. My grandfather has a legal right to handicap-accessible parking. These spots aren't being used, and they're closer to the entrance. It's a reasonable accommodation, I explained, trying to keep my cool. These spots are reserved because I reserved them. The HOA and parent committee work together on these events, and, as president of both, I get to make these decisions, Deborah insisted, her voice rising with each word. By now a small crowd had gathered. Parents arriving for the fundraiser were slowing down to watch the drama unfold. My son's teacher, Ms. Peterson, approached cautiously. Is everything okay out here? She asked, looking concerned. Before I could answer, Deborah jumped in. No, everything is not okay. Melissa here thinks her family is above the parking rules that everyone else has to follow. My grandfather, ever the peacemaker, tried to defuse the situation. Perhaps I should just move my car to another spot. I don't want to cause any trouble. That's when Deborah made a fatal mistake. As my grandfather turned to get back into his car, she stepped forward and put her hand on his shoulder to stop him. You're not going anywhere until I've made my point clear. My grandfather, startled by the sudden contact, lost his balance slightly. He instinctively reached out to steady himself, his hand brushing against Deborah's arm. What happened next still plays in my mind in slow motion. How dare you touch me, Deborah shrieked, and before anyone could react, she shoved my grandfather backward. When he didn't fall, as she apparently expected, she actually balled her hand into a fist and struck him in the chest. Pop stumbled back against his car, more shocked than hurt. Miss Peterson gasped. Several parents pulled out their phones, recording the incident. I rushed to my grandfather's side. "Are you okay?" I asked, heart pounding. "I'm fine," he assured me, though I could see he was shaken. At 78, any physical altercation could have serious consequences. Deborah seemed to suddenly realize what she'd done. Her eyes widened as she looked around at the crowd of witnesses, phones raised and recording, but instead of apologizing, she doubled down. "He grabbed me first. Everyone saw it. He's just trying to make me look bad because I caught his granddaughter breaking the rules." Her voice had risen to a near hysterical pitch. That's when a deep voice from the crowd spoke up. "Actually, ma'am, that's not what happened at all." Principal Ramirez stepped forward, his expression grave. "I saw the whole thing, as did at least 15 other witnesses. You put your hands on him first, and then you struck him. That's assault." "That's ridiculous. I was just defending myself," Deborah sputtered, her perfectly made-up face contorting with indignation. My grandfather straightened up, and something in his demeanor changed. Suddenly, he wasn't just my sweet Pops anymore. I was seeing a glimpse of the police officer he'd been for 35 years. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step back," he said, his voice taking on an authority I hadn't heard in years. "You've committed assault against a senior citizen, and there are multiple witnesses. I may be retired, but I still know the law." Deborah's face went from red to pale in seconds. "Retired? Retired what?" "Police Captain James Miller, ma'am. 35 years with the department, 20 as captain. I'd prefer not to press charges, but that's going to depend on your next actions." His voice was calm, but firm. The crowd had grown larger. I could see several members of the school board among them, watching with expressions ranging from shock to what looked suspiciously like satisfaction. Deborah began to sputter. This is absurd. Do you know who I am? I run this HOA. I'm on the school board. And I have 35 years of documented community service and a chest bruise from where you just assaulted me," my grandfather replied evenly. "Now, I suggest you walk away and we can discuss this like adults, after everyone has cooled down." Instead of taking the graceful exit my grandfather offered, Deborah made her second critical mistake. She looked at the gathering crowd, saw the school board members, and decided to play to what she thought was her audience. "I will not be threatened. I am calling 911 right now," she pulled out her phone dramatically. "This man assaulted me, and now he's impersonating a police officer." One of the school board members, Dr. Chen, stepped forward. "Deborah, I really think you should reconsider. We all saw what happened." But Deborah was already dialing, her fingers trembling with rage or fear, or both. She put the phone to her ear and began speaking immediately. "Yes, I'd like to report an assault and someone impersonating a police officer." While she was on the phone, Principal Ramirez approached me and my grandfather. "Captain Miller, I'm so sorry about this. Are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" My grandfather shook his head. "I'm fine, just a little shaken. And please, call me James." Within minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing but sirens off. The officers who stepped out were young, probably rookies. They approached our little group with professional caution. "We received a call about an assault," the first officer said. Deborah immediately pushed forward. "Yes, this man grabbed me and now he's claiming to be a retired police captain." The younger officer looked at my grandfather, then back at Deborah. "Ma'am, we'll need to take statements from everyone involved." My grandfather reached slowly into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. From it he extracted a worn but official-looking ID card. "Officer, I'm retired Captain James Miller. I'd be happy to give my statement." The young officer's eyes widened slightly as he looked at the ID. "Captain Miller? Sir, my dad served under you. He's Officer Dan Reynolds." My grandfather's face broke into a genuine smile. "Little Danny Reynolds? Well, I'll be. How is your father doing?" "He's great, sir. Still talks about you all the time." Deborah's face had now drained of all color. The second officer was already collecting statements from witnesses, several of whom had video of the incident on their phones. "Officers," Principal Ramirez said, "we also have security camera footage that covers this area of the parking lot. I'd be happy to provide that to you." The first officer nodded. "That would be helpful, thank you." He turned to Deborah. "Ma'am, we're going to need your statement as well." Deborah seemed to finally realize the gravity of her situation. Her eyes darted around, looking for an escape or ally, finding neither. "This is all a misunderstanding," she began weakly. "A misunderstanding caught on at least a dozen phones and the school security system," I couldn't help pointing out. After taking statements and reviewing some of the video footage on people's phones, the officers conferred quietly. Then the first officer approached Deborah. "Ma'am, based on the witness statements and video evidence, we're issuing you a citation for simple assault. Captain Miller has declined to press more serious charges, which he could given your actions against a senior citizen. You'll need to appear in court on the date listed on the citation." He handed her a slip of paper. Deborah stared at the citation in disbelief. "This is outrageous. Do you know who I am?" "Yes, ma'am, you've made that quite clear," the officer replied evenly. "Now, I suggest you leave the premises to avoid any further incidents." Deborah looked like she wanted to argue further, but something in the officer's expression made her think better of it. She snatched the citation and stormed toward her luxury SUV, parked, ironically, in one of the reserved spots. As she was getting into her car, Dr. Chen called out to her, "Deborah, the school board will be having an emergency meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Your presence is required." Deborah froze, one foot in her vehicle. "What? Why?" "I think you know why," Dr. Chen replied calmly. "Assaulting an elderly parent at a school function is grounds for immediate review of your position on the board." The fundraiser continued after the excitement died down, and was actually our most successful one yet. My grandfather became something of a celebrity among the parents, many of whom had apparently been suffering under Deborah's reign of HOA terror for years. The next morning I accompanied my grandfather to the emergency school board meeting. Deborah sat alone on one side of the room, her usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled. The board members entered and took their seats at the front. Dr. Chen called the meeting to order. "This emergency session has been called to address the incident that occurred yesterday in the school parking lot involving board member Deborah Wilson and Captain James Miller." The board reviewed the video evidence and witness statements. When they asked if anyone wished to speak, my grandfather stood. "I don't want to see Mrs. Wilson's life ruined over a momentary lapse in judgment," he said generously. "But I do believe positions of authority require self-restraint and respect for others, especially those with disabilities or special needs." The board deliberated briefly before Dr. Chen announced their decision. "Mrs. Wilson, in light of your actions yesterday, which violated multiple sections of our board conduct policy, we have voted unanimously to remove you from the school board, effective immediately." Deborah's jaw dropped. "You can't do that. I've been on this board for 3 years. I've raised more money than anyone." "We can and we have," Dr. Chen replied firmly. "Additionally, we will be recommending to the HOA Council that they review your position there as well, given that you used your dual authority to create parking restrictions that were not approved by either body." Deborah stood up, knocking her chair backward. "This isn't over. I'll sue all of you," she stormed out, slamming the door behind her so hard that the glass panel rattled in its frame. 2 weeks later, the citation resulted in a fine of $1,500.00 plus court costs and mandatory community service hours. But the real blow came when the HOA Council, emboldened by the school board's action, also voted to remove her as president after a special election was held. As the results were announced at the HOA meeting, Deborah's face crumpled in shock as she realized her reign of petty tyranny had come to an abrupt end.